Hello, ladies and gentlemen out there in YouTube and Facebook land. My name is Rob Frankel from Ron's Consignment, 714 Washington Avenue, Woodbine, New Jersey. I'm excited today because we're going to get into a little bit of strange history. And by strange history, call it a science experiment gone wrong, a simple trick of alchemy of how to turn the absolute most useless metal on Earth, this is about a kilogram of lead, into one of the most priceless. This is about 2 total ounces of 24 karat gold Chinese pandas. Why are they pandas? Because we have to go back to 9th century China. By definition, to turn lead into gold, simply one atom or one proton apart on the periodic table, the Chinese became fond of mixing 3 chemicals. Except when they did, let's just say it wasn't quite what they expected. Gunpowder is born. Now, for many years, it became the fodder of fireworks. However, around the 12th century, the Chinese then came up with the brilliant idea to propel a projectile. Now, most of the time, when we think of the Ming Dynasty, we think of some amazing, amazing china. You know, the amazing ceramics that came from that era. The Ming Dynasty began in 1382 after Christ. What I have here is actually a Ming Dynasty mid-period, approximately 1460s, what's known as a Sun-Yang-Chang. This is actually available for sale here at Ron's Consignments. Let's take a look at what it is. Now, the Sun-Yang-Chang literally translates to three-eyed dragon. Not many of you have ever seen one. Very few people out of Asia have ever actually held one. This is an antiquity. It is certainly legal for sale. This happens to be one of those items that you'll only find here at Ron's Consignments. So the three-eyed Sun-Yang-Chang was strictly an anti-personnel device. Call it your first semi-automatic weapon of sorts. What happened would be that the gunner would load a charge of powder down each barrel, then fill the rest with iron shavings. Now, you may say that's very light. How could this possibly work? The answer is that it was devastatingly effective at close quarters, especially towards the end of the Ming Dynasty to the Qing Dynasty. These became very extensively used. They were often mounted on a pike. Fuses were wrapped around it. They would light the fuse, hold up, and rotate 1, 2, 3. Absolutely devastating at close range. It was enough to scare away any horseman, any bowman, any swordsman at the time. But of course, when Marco Polo had visited in the 12th century, he noted some of the innovative usages of this mystical black powder, as we found, and certainly was happy to bring it back to Europe. And of course, one such very interested individual was a gentleman by the name of Pietro Beretta. Pietro Beretta then founded the world's second oldest corporation, second only to the Catholic Church. So we're going to take a look at, this is actually what I will show you is a recreation of Beretta's first pistoia, or pistola, pipe. Of course, after Marco Polo returned from China, one of the interesting things he brought aside from pasta, and yes, one of those great creations, was of course the idea for, as Pietro Beretta would call it, la pistola or pipe. So as we can see, it looks really nothing more than a pipe. However, when either fired from a 1 or 2 man crew, this is known as the linstock or tiller, containing slow match. So, if you can imagine 2 knights charging at each other, one bravely grabs his broadsword or lance. We expect the stuff of Hollywood legends, but the reality is by even the 1300s in Europe, you might see a knight charging on horseback wielding one of these. A simple touch to the gunpowder, the ball would fly out, and now solid projectiles were actually created. This happens to be a recreation of an original Beretta from the 1300s. And again, this one we actually cannot sell just because it is a recreation. But nonetheless, very interesting idea when you think about what was required to actually charge into battle. So a simple experiment turning lead to gold now leads to one of the world's most game-changing inventions. The handgong, as it is called, is tucked under one's armpit, at which point a rudimentary sighting system of simple dimples in the brass barrel is constructed, and at orders one would drop their match, or the pointed stick at the bottom of the linstock allowed to simply place the match in the ground, leading potential enemies at night to think that they are under fire. Brilliant psychological warfare, but heaven forbid, they say it beats a sharp stick. Well, sometimes if all you have is a sharp stick, the sharp stick will do. But pretty soon we would see more advancements. And one of the major disadvantages we could see is the requirement of either a second person or a second tool to fire your gun. Not very efficient. So around the 1400s in Europe, we start to see a new type of weapon develop, and that is, of course, the hackbus, or literally arquebus. These were originally laid across walls, but probably no single monarch was more excited about the advancement than Henry VIII of England. So aside from 8 wives, Henry VIII comes up with an amazing standardized pattern. Now, the invention had already been around Europe for quite some time, but of course, the odds of seeing one, quite rare. But you can at Ron's. Now, built during Christopher Columbus's lifetime, this is a pattern matchlock musket of 1526. We can see that it does have, of course, its match to fire. Very, very interesting point. Imagine you are in battle. You have this unwieldy, large musket that actually points amazing as the finest of shotguns produced today. Incredibly well done. But now speaking of drill movement. So, in order to load, you must remove thy scouring stick. Shorten to a handful. Pour your charge in. Ram thy charge home. Remove thy scouring stick, because if you inadvertently shot while that scouring stick was still in the barrel, you'd have no way to reload. And now you had a useless musket, with the exception of its long size and this extremely large club butt. Now, if we take a look, you can see that the nails in the butt plate are actually medieval square nails. Pre-Renaissance, absolutely amazing. Now, the next thing you would then have to do in the heat of battle, replace thy scouring stick. And of course, aim on target. Now, you then must blow upon your burning match. Now, you had to be careful because at the time, the musketeer carried their charges on a bandolier. They carried 12, known as apostles, obviously for religious connotation. You then blew on your match to make sure that you had a good light. In the same heat of battle, you now had to fit the match into the jaws of the serpentine to be sure that it would indeed contact the powder and not the ones you are wearing around your neck. You then fit the match in the jaws, presented, open the pan, and on order, give fire. It was done that simply. Now, this particular matchlock musket is naturally a smoothbore. Its original scouring stick or ramrod has been damaged. There are certain points to it that are not original. The screws are not original to the musket. This is something that's been changed through time. Now, something like this is very seldom encountered. I'm not going to lie, this particular musket is well into the 4 figures. However, it is one of a kind. You will never, ever, ever see another one like it. This is .62 caliber. We have tested for functionality and safety. The answer is yes. At 100 yards, we have successfully been able to strike 30-inch bullseyes. So, of course, one of the interesting points of musketry is that eventually time would move on and the idea of a burning rope would be replaced by the flintlock. And of course, we have some beautiful flintlocks here at Ron's Consignments. They're made before January 1st, 1899, incapable of firing any sort of fixed ammunition. One of the interesting points is that although time has moved on much further, and today, unless you are a historian or a black powder enthusiast, well, most of us would never have usage for these things, but there are certain terms that remain in our vocabulary. Now, of course, the days of things like the flintlock and matchlock have long left us, but some of the terminology has never left the language. For example, have you ever had something that seemed like it was going to work, be it, a job, be it a streak of good fortune, be it a romance, and then suddenly it just fizzled out? But let's say it didn't work out. Well, you might just say it was nothing more than a flash in the pan. I'm Robert Frankel, Ron's Consignment, 714 Washington Avenue, Woodbine, New Jersey. And we'll see you here next week.